Imagine you owe a pretty massive debt. You're stressed out, your cortisol is just completely spiking, and you're staring at your phone, dreading that next call.
Oh, yeah, that absolute sinking feeling in your stomach.
Exactly. But when it finally rings, the person on the other end doesn't threaten you.
Right.
They don't, read off this massive list of compound interest rates. Instead, they use exactly 7 very specific, carefully tested words.
Right, and because of the psychological weight of those 7 words, you don't hang up. You actually make a payment.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tearing down the hidden architecture of money. We're looking at everything from the behavioral psychology of a $50 collection call to the automated software running million-dollar corporate cash flows, all the way to the massive mathematical formulas predicting whether a national currency is about to collapse.
Yeah, and the stack of sources we are pulling from today is incredibly diverse, but they really all point to the exact same fundamental truth.
Yeah, we've got business automation playbooks, behavioral psychology analyses from HubSpot, academic papers on the Uzbek Psalm, and this fascinating breakdown of debt collection scripts from Prodigal.
And when you put them all together, you realize that the financial world isn't, it's not a perfectly calibrated machine. It's this incredibly messy human reality that is just constantly colliding with cold, hard numbers.
Right. And to make sure we don't get completely lost in all this data today, we're actually going to borrow a structural tip from one of our sources.
Oh, the Reddit guide.
Yeah, a Reddit guide on audio scripting, which is kind of meta, but it suggests moving logically from the most granular level to the grandest scale, without losing you, the listener, in the weeds.
So we're going to start at the absolute ground floor, which is the mind of an individual in debt.
Because if you want to understand global finance, you really have to figure out how to get a single person to open their wallet when they're under intense, agonizing pressure.
Right. And, the traditional approach to debt collection completely ignored how the human brain actually functions under stress.
It was just all about brute force, right?
Exactly. Incessant phone calls, harsh letters, a barrage of legal threats. But the HubSpot source dives deep into the behavioral economics of why people actually pay, and it leans heavily on Daniel Kahneman's dual system theory of the brain.
Which is such a fascinating framework.
It really is. So Kahneman explains that we have 2 basic modes of thinking. System 1 is fast, it's automatic, highly emotional, and heavily reliant on biases and shortcuts.
Basically survival mode.
Yeah, basically. And then system 2 is your methodical, logical, slow-thinking brain. It's the part of you that can sit down and do a really complex math problem.
Which is funny because whenever economists talk about humans making perfectly rational financial decisions, they are completely assuming we spend all our time in that methodical, logical system too.
Right. Which is just a fundamental miscalculation of human biology. I mean, when a person is in debt, they are experiencing chronic financial stress.
And that physically changes things.
It does. That stress triggers the body to flood with cortisol. And high cortisol levels physically impair a person's working memory and executive function.
Wow.
So the biological reality is that a stressed debtor is functionally trapped in System 1. Their brain is operating on pure emotional survival mode.
So if a debt collector approaches them with a highly complex, logical System 2 argument like, explaining amortization schedules and long-term legal ramifications, the debtor's brain literally cannot process that information effectively.
They just shut down.
It's like trying to teach someone calculus while a fire alarm is going off in their living room.
That is a great way to put it.
The brain just prioritizes the immediate perceived threat over the complex math every single time.
Exactly. And that brings us to Richard Thaler's concept of choice architecture.
Choice architecture. Okay, break that down for us.
So choice architecture is the practice of deliberately organizing the context in which people make decisions to gently guide them toward a better outcome. The sources highlight the UK's automatic pension enrollment as the classic example of this. For years, the government tried to convince people to save for retirement by handing out informational brochures, basically appealing to System 2.
Which, as we just established, doesn't really work.
It barely worked at all. But when they changed the default options so that employees were automatically enrolled and had to actively fill out a form to opt out,
Participation skyrocketed.
they simply removed the cognitive load.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because reading through these sources, choice architecture sounds a little bit like a dressed-up corporate term for manipulation.
It's a fair critique.
I just keep thinking of the Paco Underhill supermarket trick, putting the dairy section at the absolute back of the store, so you are forced to walk past all the impulse buys just to get your milk.
Right, the classic retail trap.
Yeah. So if we are designing systems that deliberately bypass someone's logical thinking, are we just tricking stressed out people into paying their bills?
Well, it's a completely valid point to raise, and the line between guidance and manipulation is definitely thin. But the distinction really lies in the ultimate outcome for the individual.
Okay, how so?
The supermarket is manipulating your environment to extract extra money from you, which harms your long-term financial health. But ethical choice architecture in a debt scenario is designed to help a cognitively overloaded mind make a decision that actually benefits them in the long run.
Because ignoring the debt makes it worse.
Exactly. Unresolved debt destroys credit scores, it invites legal action, and it causes immense long-term suffering. By simplifying the path to resolution, you aren't tricking them into giving up something they shouldn't. You are just removing the friction that their stressed brain simply can't overcome on its own.
So bringing this back to those 7 words I mentioned at the start of the deep dive, how do you actually script this out in practice? Like, how do you apply choice architecture to a live collection call?
We can look directly at the prodigal collection scripts for that, which are heavily optimized for both legal compliance and psychological impact. The specific language used completely alters the outcome.
Give me an example.
So the behavioral insights team ran experiments and found that using active wording like "you owe" instead of the passive amount owed significantly increases payments.
Oh, because it forces accountability.
Exactly. But the most fascinating example is a tiny tweak they made to a UK tax collection letter.
What do they do?
They simply added a single sentence. You are currently in the small minority of people who have not paid.
Wow.
Just that one sentence. And it raised payment rates by over 5%.
5%. I mean, on a national tax scale, that is a massive, massive amount of revenue.
Huge.
And I imagine that works because it triggers a really deep evolutionary instinct.
Right.
Right. Tribal survival relies on not being the outcast.
Yes.
So if you are told that everyone else has already paid, the fear of social exclusion just completely overrides the fear of losing the money.
The psychology is incredibly potent. And prodigal scripts show how this scales dynamically to the individual debtor's situation.
Okay, so it's not just a one-size-fits-all script.
Not at all. If the agent realizes a customer simply forgot a bill, the script provides a quick transactional fix designed for speed, like, would you like to resolve this right now with a quick payment over the phone?
Get them in and out before System 2 even wakes up.
Right. But if the debtor indicates genuine financial hardship, the script pivots entirely. The agent is prompted to use profound empathy, lower their tone, and offer a partial payment plan.
You really have to match the choice architecture to the specific cognitive state the debtor is currently experiencing.
Precisely. Because if you give a stressed person too many repayment options, the whole paradox of choice thing, their motivation to make any decision just plummets to zero.
And it's not just the spoken words that cause friction, right? The actual digital interface matters just as much.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources reference Jared Spool's idea that good UX design user experience is basically like air conditioning. You only notice it when it's broken.
That is the perfect analogy. If the air conditioning is perfect, you just focus on the task at hand.
Right.
But imagine a debtor finally summons the cognitive energy and emotional courage to click a link to resolve their debt. If they hit a broken interface, like that GooCast 404 error page mentioned in our stack of sources,
Oh man, that is absolutely catastrophic for collection rates.
the friction just spikes. The cortisol wins the battle. The debtor abandons the payment process. And honestly, they likely won't try again for weeks.
Okay, so we've figured out how to get the individual debtor out of System 1 panic and into a payment plan. But that creates a completely new problem, doesn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, when thousands of those individual payments suddenly hit a company's bank account at different times, the cognitive overload just transfers from the debtor to the corporate finance team.
Oh, 100%.
So let's scale this up. Let's look at how a business actually survives that incoming wave of cash.
It is stunning how quickly businesses fall into psychological traps that are just as fatal as the ones trapping consumers.
Yeah, I was reading the Finmir source, and it highlights this classic devastating blind spot, confusing the profit and loss statement with actual cash flow.
It happens all the time. They share the story of a business owner. Let's call him David.
Right, David.
He was running a massive wholesale distribution company doing $8 million in revenue. On paper, looking at his P&L, he was incredibly successful. The margins were good.
But come October, he couldn't make payroll.
Right.
$8 million in revenue, but he can't pay his own employees. I was looking at that case study and just trying to figure out how a business owner lets that happen. It seems like such an obvious failure of basic math.
It seems obvious in hindsight, but it happens because accounting rules record revenue when the invoice is sent out the door, not when the cash actually arrives in the bank account.
Ooh.
So David's clients, the people buying his products, they were on 45-day payment terms. But his own suppliers, the people he bought raw materials from, demanded payment in 15 days.
Oh, no.
So he was structurally guaranteed to run out of cash, even while his top-line revenue was growing exponentially.
That is terrifying.
The P&L didn't lie, it just answered the wrong question. It told him his business model was profitable, but it didn't tell him if he actually had the liquidity to survive the month.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. P&L is like looking at your car's overall fuel efficiency rating.
Okay, I like this.
It tells you that under optimal conditions, your engine performs beautifully. But cash flow is actually checking the gas gauge before you merge onto the highway.
Yes.
The efficiency rating doesn't matter at all if the tank is completely empty today. And the terrifying thing about that empty gas tank is that the driver usually doesn't realize it until the engine completely stalls out in the fast lane.
That is exactly what happens. And to fix that gas gauge, the sources lay out 3 non-negotiable rules for businesses to maintain visibility.
Let's hear them.
Number 1, implement a rolling 13-week cash flow forecast.
13 weeks, okay.
You need to see a cash crunch 6 weeks before it hits you, not the day payroll is due.
Makes sense.
Number 2, a Monday morning receivables aging report. Anyone who owes the company money past 30 days gets a physical phone call, not another easily ignored email.
Right, you have to break through the noise.
Exactly. And number 3, a mandatory minimum 6-week cash reserve. That is the operational oxygen mask that gives the company time to react when a major client pays late.
But implementing a 13-week forecast and a daily aging report, I mean, that sounds like an absolute nightmare of manual data entry.
It is.
I know so many startups that are running their entire multi-million-dollar operations off of a single, terrifying, massive Excel spreadsheet.
And that brings us to what the Finmir and Quantum Byte sources call the 88% problem.
The 88% problem.
Studies show that 88% of all Excel files contain hidden errors. When you are a solo founder with one simple bank account, Excel is an incredible tool. But at scale, manual data entry has a baseline 4% error rate.
Which really adds up fast.
You have finance associates manually keying in hundreds of invoices. Someone accidentally hard-codes a cell, overriding a formula. Someone breaks a VLOOKUP.
Oh, the dreaded broken VLOOKUP.
Suddenly, you have a massive version-controlled nightmare with files named, cash flow plan, final new 2.
We have all been there.
The finance team is overwhelmed. They're working until midnight just trying to reconcile the books. It is entirely unsustainable.
It's really the exact same cognitive overload we just talked about with the individual debtor.
Precisely.
The stress goes up, the working memory degrades,
Yeah.
and mistakes just compound on top of each other.
Which is why the data shows 58% of finance functions are currently moving to AI and automation.
Okay, so software is taking over the manual labor.
Exactly. Modern software uses APIs to directly connect to the company's bank accounts. It automatically pulls the data, categorizes transactions, flags those crucial 30-day unpaid invoices, and reconciles the ledger without a human ever touching a keyboard.
Enterprise automation software isn't cheap, though. I mean, how are these CFOs justifying the return on investment for tools like this?
Well, the Quantum Byte source provides a very clear framework for the ROI. It isn't just about saving labor hours by firing bookkeepers.
Right.
It's about gaining what they call a strategic premium.
Strategic premium.
For example, automation can reduce the financial close time at the end of the month from 10 days down to 4 days.
Oh, wow. So you get the data way faster.
Exactly. That means the executive team is making crucial strategic decisions on data that is fresh rather than looking in the rearview mirror at data that is nearly 2 weeks old.
And you are actively eliminating that 4% manual error rate.
Add in the ability to capture early payment discounts because vendor invoices are processed faster, and, of course, the avoidance of late fees.
It all ends up.
When you factor in all those elements, the payback period for deploying these automation systems is typically just 12 to 18 months.
That's incredibly fast.
The software pays for itself by plugging the microscopic leaks in the cash flow pipe.
Okay, so if David's $8 million company can completely collapse from a cash flow bottleneck, what happens when an entire nation runs on a bad collection strategy?
It's really messy.
Let's scale this up one final time and look at the macro economy.
Yeah, the Research Leap and Asian Development Bank sources provide a perfect real-world case study here with Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan, okay.
The nation has a very ambitious goal to reach upper middle income status by 2030. To achieve that, they really need to build a robust middle class, which relies entirely on a foundation of small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs.
Right.
But there is a massive structural hurdle threatening the financial stability of the entire transition.
I was actually looking at the ADB source, and it seems like the entire modernization plan is hitting a brick wall with their energy monopolies. Companies like Uzbekenergo and Uztransgaz are suffering from severe financial deterioration. It looks like a massive accounts receivable issue, but I'm trying to figure out how a state monopoly even lets that happen in the first place.
It stems from a deeply ingrained systemic cultural issue. The country operates heavily on a post-paid culture for basic utilities like electricity and gas.
Postpaid.
Yeah, consumers use the energy first for an entire month and are expected to pay for it later.
Wait, hold on. We literally just talked about David's business failing because of delayed payments.
Yep.
And now we see state monopolies failing to collect because they allow a post-paid culture. They're literally fighting human nature on a national scale without using any choice architecture.
The structural flaw is identical. When you have a historically low level of consumer payment discipline combined with a post-paid system, you are structurally inviting massive accounts receivable problems.
This is the same trap.
The utilities generate the power, burn the fuel, pay the workers, but the cash doesn't come back into the system for months, if at all.
So what's the fix?
The recommendation from the research is to implement prepaid smart meters.
Oh, which fundamentally alters the choice architecture.
Exactly. You pay for the electricity before you consume it. This immediately protects the cash flow of the utility monopolies, which in turn stabilizes the national economy and provides a secure foundation for those SMEs to actually grow.
But when a country is trying to rapidly modernize its financial systems and alter consumer behavior on this massive scale, the currency itself must react to all that friction, right?
Oh, heavily.
The sources dive deep into econometric modeling of the Uzbek som to the US dollar. And I'm going to be honest with you, reading about RCH and JARCH models and excess kurtosis, it gets very academic very fast.
It really does.
Can you break down the mechanics of what these models actually tell us about human behavior at scale?
Think of a JRCH less like a standard weather radar and more like a highly sensitive seismograph sitting on a fault line.
Okay, a seismograph.
It doesn't just measure the size of the earthquake today. The mathematics actually assume that the Earth is fundamentally fractured now, meaning today's shaking physically guarantees more aftershocks tomorrow.
Interesting.
The researchers looked at the daily exchange rate of the Uzbek som from 2021 to 2024, and they found significant evidence of this phenomenon, which economists call volatility clustering.
Volatility clustering. So trouble comes in bunches, and quiet periods breed more quiet periods.
Exactly. The model proves that market turbulence is contagious. Furthermore, they ran statistical tests that revealed something called excess kurtosis.
Okay, excess kurtosis. How does that translate into actual market dynamics? Because it sounds like a medical condition.
It does. In statistics, excess kurtosis means the distribution curve has fat tails.
Fat tails.
Yeah, so if you picture a standard bell curve, most events happen in the middle, right? And the tails taper off to almost nothing, meaning extreme events are incredibly rare.
Right, a normal distribution.
But a fat tail means there's a much larger volume of data sitting out at the extreme edges. In plain English, massive market spikes or devastating currency crashes happen much more frequently in this market than standard rational financial models would ever predict.
Wow.
Excess kurtosis just proves mathematically what we already know. Psychologically, markets panic faster and more aggressively than standard models account for.
The seismograph is telling us to expect severe foundational shocks much more often than the historical average might imply.
Spot on. And perhaps the most fascinating nuance of all comes from the EJAR-RCH model, which specifically measures asymmetric responses to news.
Okay.
It found that the Uzbek exchange market has heavy leverage effects. This means that a sudden positive market shock actually causes more volatility than a negative shock of the exact same size.
Wait, I really want to focus on this because it feels completely counterintuitive.
Doesn't it?
A positive shock like, I don't know, unexpectedly good economic news or a massive influx of foreign investment makes the currency more unstable and turbulent than a sudden crash.
Yes.
Why would good news rock the boat harder than bad news?
Well, in many highly developed, mature markets, bad news drives panic, and good news brings calm stability.
Which is what you expect.
But in developing or transitional economies, a sudden positive surge acts like a starting gun.
Hmm.
It triggers aggressive speculative trading. Investors rapidly reassess their risk models, and massive waves of capital scramble into the country to capitalize on the new growth.
I see.
The existing financial infrastructure just isn't used to digesting large, sudden, positive surges of capital. So the sheer volume of speculative movement shakes the framework harder than a negative shock, which, frankly, the market might already be culturally and systemically braced for.
That is wild. The scramble to capture the upside actually creates more structural instability than the fear of a downturn.
It highlights why understanding the unique underlying mathematics of a specific currency is so crucial. You literally cannot manage national monetary policy in an emerging market using the exact same assumptions you would use for the euro or the dollar.
So, to bring this all together for you listening, whether you are trying to manage your own household budget and deal with a late fee, whether you are tracking a startup's fragile cash flow in a deeply flawed version 7 Excel sheet, or you are analyzing international investments in Central Asia, the systems that govern the flow of money are all undergoing the exact same transition.
Right across the board.
We are moving away from manual, stressful, biologically flawed processes and moving toward highly automated, psychologically tuned environments. At every single level, the primary goal of modern finance is to remove the human friction.
Which brings up a final critical thought for you to consider as these systems evolve.
Let's hear it.
We've seen how AI is currently automating corporate cash flow, right? Tracking
Wow.
invoices with perfect API accuracy.
Yeah.
And we've seen how collection call scripts can be expertly tailored to the behavioral psychology of a stressed human being. But consider what happens in the very near future when these discrete systems fully integrate with one another.
How so? What does that integration actually look like?
Imagine a world where an AI financial agent is making a debt collection call to your phone. Could we see a scenario where the AI dynamically adjusts its own empathy level and alters its specific vocabulary in real time based entirely on the mathematical volatility of the nation's currency that very morning?
Wait, really?
Think about it. If the GRCH model predicts extreme market turbulence and a potential liquidity crunch, the AI instantly recalculates. It might proactively offer you a much more lenient payment plan to guarantee at least some baseline cash flow for the company before the economic shock even hits.
Wow.
We are rapidly approaching a reality where massive algorithms and econometric models might literally dictate the exact level of human-sounding empathy you receive in the financial world.
That is an incredibly heavy thought. The gas gauge isn't just checking the fuel anymore, it's actively talking to you, analyzing your biological stress levels, and checking the geopolitical seismograph all at the exact same time.
It's coming faster than we think.
Definitely something to mull over the next time you receive a very politely worded text message about an overdue bill, and you wonder exactly why they chose those specific 7 words. Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.